And covering the situation in Gaza, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza after the war, I think more intensely than any other Western journalist that I can think of. And what we aimed to do was that as soon as we got into Gaza, in the middle of the 51-day war, towards the end, during the first extended humanitarian ceasefire, I mean, not only was I taking notes and recording all the interviews with audio devices, we were filming everything. So everything that you read about in this book, or most of it, that we documented, that I documented, is on film. And Dan has continued to film in the Gaza Strip through one of the worst winters in recorded history, in an area where 20% of residential areas have been destroyed, where 10 to 18,000 homes have been leveled, completely or partially destroyed, where 100,000 people are homeless. And it's the man-made humanitarian crisis that is destroying the livelihood of people right now. And we're not talking about it. There's a silence around it. So I've been on this tour, and I've been on tour in the U.S. to disrupt the silence, to memorialize not only the victims of the war, but to remember those who resisted the Israeli onslaught, and to document the crimes and name the criminals. It was like one of the Saw films, just to go into a home like that in Hosea, and to have someone take you into their bathroom where 6 men were summarily executed. That's what I want to convey with the film, but I also want to convey the testimonies of the people who went through the violence without injecting my own voice. And that's kind of what I tried to do with this book. And I think what I want to do with this talk is just take you through some of the aspects of the war from the beginning to the end. The ground invasion began on July 12th. And to understand what happened there, you have to understand some military history. And so that's another thing I sought to achieve with the book, is to analyze the military doctrine and capacities of both the Israeli army and the Palestinian resistance factions, which are led by the most powerful faction, the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of Hamas. Now, when the Israeli ground invasion began in Shuja'iyya, which is now an area that is destroyed. And you can see an image of Shuja'iyya on the front of my book. It looks like Warsaw after World War II. Why was it destroyed? Well, the Israel's Golani Brigade entered Shuja'iyya, and the Al-Qassam brigades had lured them into what was a trap. Just to tell you a little something about Al-Qassam, this is a group that's identified in the West with suicide bombing, with attacks on soft Israeli targets. And in 1994, after the massacre in Hebron by Baruch Goldstein, a fanatical settler who killed 29 Palestinian worshippers at the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron, a fanatical settler from Brooklyn who's still celebrated in parts of Israeli society, who has a shrine to him in Hebron and the settlement of Kiryat Arba. After this, Yahya Ayash, who was the first general commander of the Al-Qassam brigades, decided to strike back. The Al-Qassam brigades didn't have many weapons. They didn't have much capacity to fight Israeli soldiers, and so the suicide bombing was the tactic of choice. And this was a weapon, a tool that was employed to torment Israeli society throughout the 90s and through the Second Intifada until 2005. In 2005, as the Second Intifada came to an end, Israel disengaged from the Gaza Strip. It pulled out its settlements and began to occupy the Gaza Strip through the panopticon model, in which it controls the exterior, walling in the surplus population of Gaza, basically warehousing them. Drones became the means in which Israel controlled the Gaza Strip, and robots, like the robotic machine guns, like the Spot and Strike system, which is the first photo you'll see in my book of the robotic machine gun on the wall pointing inwards to Beit Hanun in northern Gaza. The naval cordon that prevents Gaza fishermen from fishing more than 3 kilometers at sea. So Gaza was still under occupation, but Israelis were not inside. The Israeli military entered in armored personnel carriers, some of which were supplied by the U.S. military that were surplus vehicles, lightly armored Vietnam-era vehicles. One was immediately attacked by an Al-Qassam sapper team that emerged from a tunnel and planted an explosive charge by hand on the vehicle. I think the vehicle was attacked by rocket-propelled grenades. Massive firepower came down and sent it into a ball of flames. 8 soldiers were killed, one of whom was Oron Shaul, whose body was taken by the fighters because they thought he might be alive. This sent massive panic through the high command of the Israeli military because of the fear of a captured soldier, leading to a Gilad Shalit-style situation in which the Israeli government would have to negotiate with Hamas for the release of over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners again, something which is extremely unpopular, particularly with the Israeli government under the control of the right wing. The artillery divisions, which had been assembled prior to the invasion along the border of Shuja'iyeh, which represented almost 50% of the total artillery pieces in Israel's entire arsenal, opened fire randomly on the entire area in order to wipe out any vestige of resistance, along with all of the civilians who happened to be trapped in the area. So we're talking about something like 7,000 120 and 155 millimeter howitzer shells falling on civilian homes, 3 to 4 story civilian homes, in less than 24 hours, destroying this entire area to avert a humiliating defeat at the hands of local resistance who really represent young men coming out of their homes to defend their neighborhoods.